Okay, so this is long overdue, but I wanted to go through all of your files here and give you some feedback here. So some of you turned in revisions. I'm going to just go ahead and give you critique on the revision now instead of the old version because you've already made some changes to it. So if you have a revised version, I'll try to get that and make sure. Okay, so Adam, let's go ahead and start with you. So I'm going to look at the JPEG right now. Overall, I actually think this one came out pretty good. The only real issues I personally have with this is it feels like there's sort of a change in illustration style depending on where we're looking at the image. So like this all in the face is very clean and like sharp, and you have some great detail in how you get these very clean lines. But then we get down here in the hair, and this feels almost like it's just been sketched in there. And so there's parts of the hair that also has that sort of clean line feel to it. And then you have these areas here where it feels like there's a little less thought in how that shape was achieved. It was more of like you're just trying to chisel some pieces out of it. But then we get like this piece here that's almost like it's getting thicker as it goes away from that, so it doesn't really feel like a hair. And then we can still feel some of the brush strokes in some of these areas here. So to me, it just needs a little bit more cleaning up. And I don't mind the sort of scraggly feel, a little bit like this stuff here. I actually think that looks pretty good along the edge. It's more of it needs to feel a little bit more controlled instead of sketched, or this area up here needs to feel a little bit more sketched instead of feeling so controlled. I think that finding a balance between how to get some of this feel and meld it with the way the face is feeling is sort of where you're fighting now. Having said that, overall, this is a really well done piece. I love what you've done with the colors. I like your changing and your framing here. It's got a lot of good stuff going on, and so that's awesome. So let's go ahead, Megan Adams. Okay, and let's pull yours up here. So I don't know if this was before or after you approached me and asked me for some in-person feedback. I do think that this has improved a little bit from what you showed on the first critique. To me, I'm still feeling like I'm missing some information. And you don't have to really spoon feed it to me, but it's more of like I need just some hints on what's going on over here, maybe what's going on down here, what's going on in these big black areas. I like the idea that you're going for this like pixelated, like 8-bit or probably even like 8-bit graphic effect. But I still feel like it needs like sort of some play on how noisy some of this gets. Like this area right through here just feels really noisy to me. Like there's just a lot of changing in there, a lot of little jagged pieces, and it almost starts to become disruptive to the way that those forms are communicating. I think we also talked about the sort of your change of color. Like you go from really dark, slightly less dark, slightly less dark, slightly less dark, and then this gray seems like it's a step down too far, because this feels a little darker to me, or it's almost feeling like they're competing for which one is darker, which one should come in front. And I think some of that is because it's so desaturated. So maybe even it needs just a touch of this red hue in it, or this pink hue to it. But like right now, it's like it feels like there's this weird like negative void happening there. So I'd play with that color just a little bit to see if that fixes some of it. And to me, like the biggest thing is just like some of the areas, because of sort of the style you're going for, gets a little confusing to me. Like I'm not really sure what's happening right here in the corner of his eye either. Does it go up and then come back down? Is he like squinting, or is there just sort of like some information right through there that's kind of missing? Otherwise, though, this is actually I like the style, and just, keep working to clarify a few things. So Chelsea, you also have a revision. So let's see what we got here. There's not a lot that is really wrong with this one. This one looks really good to me. The few things that I kind of notice is very, very subtle things. Like, one, to me, I feel like there needs to be just a touch of a hint on where the bottom of his eye there is, because it kind of, I don't know, there's something in there that feels like it's, like, even if it's just a really slight highlight or something right there to communicate it, or a slight highlight on the bottom part of his eye instead of on the lid. So something to just kind of indicate where that line is. You may also be able to pull that off by just extending this black region here a little bit further out into the eye, just to kind of be pointing at that section as well. Something that I think could help is if we had a little bit of sort of something happening in this background here. Like, there's so much neat stuff going on in his face. The background kind of just gets a little bland, and it may be because it's also the same color as his jacket or shirt here or whatever. So I would wonder is if this side of his head actually, sort of change the color just a little bit from this, just to push it back a little bit, or consider adding, like, some sort of shape here, so something to kind of pull our attention back in. You don't want our attention getting off into this gray space and sort of wandering off the page. You always kind of want to pull us back into the face. Really small thing, this is sort of this sketchy texture you have in the hair. You have going on here on the cheek, and my assumption is that has something to do with the stubble here. But I really like this treatment of the stubble more than I like this. Excuse me. And this kind of feels like you're starting to play with a sketchier means of shadowing this, like adding like some more sketchy lines to this, and I feel like that's going to, like, that's the only spot that we really see that. Whereas here in the face, it's almost more like the shape itself gets noisy to help communicate that, and so maybe that would just be a white shape that has a little bit of noise on it to help communicate that as well. And the last thing is, I think the ear just seems like there's some information missing in the ear, and it may be that it would just never go to these really, really dark colors. Like, we never quite make it to black anywhere in there, and maybe just like where it goes into there, maybe a couple of little lines in here to give us that. My guess is it's because the ear is being washed out from the light coming this way in the reference, but look for whatever your darkest color is and see if you can add just a little bit of extra darkness to it, just to kind of pull it to a little bit more of a contrasty section. The hair looks awesome. I think you could play just a touch right in through here along the hairline of like maybe some hints every now and then, because it just kind of, the texture just kind of ends in this black area here. All of those are very, very nitpicky things, because overall this one's really, really successful. So great work there. So next one is Devon. So this one is actually looking really good. I think the problem for me, okay, so how to phrase this? I think that your the stencil fill, or the fill with the repeating pattern in here, it's gotten so, like, there's so much of it that we started to kind of lose the implied change. Does that make sense? So, well, I guess we didn't really start to lose it. It's more like we lost some of the detail to it, and we're starting to see like a repetitive pattern in here. So I'll kind of show you what I mean. If we look at the flag, an area where I think it's working pretty well, we have this this darker area and then this lighter area. But my guess is that that's actually the same blue. There's just bigger spacing or smaller spacing between the symbol itself. All right. And so that's working relatively well. You get this darker color, and you were able to get a free darker color or a free lighter color just by playing with the stippling effect. Where it's not working as well is in the hand, where to me, like you're getting this light to slightly darker version of this peach, but by the time we get to here, it's almost blue, and it's not a darkened version of this peach. It's a lightened version of this blue, and so we almost are starting to get like, and I notice it most like kind of around his eyes. It's kind of like he's got this instead of a shadowed effect like you're getting here. It's almost like now he just has this blue color on his face. Sometimes that's what you want, but sometimes I don't think it's working very or as well with the skin. And to be honest, I think that this would work much better if you just scaled up the size of the emblem in there, because with this at this scale, it's indistinguishable from like a dot matrix print of an image, and so it seems like you just reduced this to a really low bit rate or something like that, and because the pattern we can kind of start to see the pattern tiling in here. You can kind of see where there's the repeating stripe, and so having said all that, that is a style, I guess, but it's not. To me, it's not probably. No, let me rephrase that. It's a style. It's not. I'm not sure it was the style you were going for. If it is the style you're going for, that's one thing. But because the rest of if you would have done it with every element of the image, it would have worked a little bit better. But right now we don't have it really in the hands or in the tie or in the white areas, or in like the lightning, and so it just appears like it was just a technique that wasn't working as well. And so I think that bumping that up to where some of the letters are actually visible would be kind of neat, and just maybe not using it in every element. So that would just be my takeaway on that. In terms of getting the form or pulling the form off, I still feel like there's a little bit lost in his nose. That could be sort of clarified a little bit there. But otherwise, it's actually reading pretty well. Okay, Jared. Okay. Give me a second here. Okay. So let me count your colors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I like this one. And it's actually sometimes kind of hard to put your finger on exactly what is not feeling like right about it. To me, the only real thing that I'm kind of losing is or that I'm not really loving on this one, is that I just feel like there's a couple of areas where like the darkest shadow is not visible, so we're losing some potential detail. Like we have these shadows that are coming down here, right? And I'm assuming that those are either from scars, wrinkles, or shadows being cast from his hair. But to me, like, that shadow would probably increase a little bit more in some of these areas here, right? So this dark area we have around the eye, like, I feel like there's some opportunities to use that to bring out some of these forms just a little bit more. On top of that, like, I think and I like this idea that we're not able to see this perfect outline around the character, but I like the idea. I like that idea, but I think there's some elements here where it could be clarified just a little bit more, like that gap there to me, and I think it could be clarified just by having a little bit more of a spike on that, kind of like what you have going on here, just kind of pointing to that arrow. But I also feel like, we have this highlight on his face, and a lot of other things have these highlights, but his jacket really doesn't, and his hair really doesn't. And so I know that some of that's probably a limitation of color. Like, you don't want to go over your color numbers, but I think we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe you do have 6. So with the revision, I would consider, if you wanted to do a revision, you can up the color range if you want to. I think you could add just a little bit more detail with this darkest color and get some more information in the forms. But overall, this is working really good. If you ever see a photo where it doesn't look like there's enough contrast in it, and like you're losing some of the details in the darks, that's kind of what this feels like to me. And so that's why I say adding just a little bit more information in some of these crevices of the face may help. And if you didn't want to do that with that darkest color, I think you could do it with a sixth color or seventh color, whichever one you're on. So. Okay, Gerald, no. Okay. Okay, actually this is interesting because this comes right on the heels of Jared's, which kind of had a similar comment, which is, this feels not contrasty enough. If you take an image and you turn the contrast down in Photoshop, that's kind of what's happening here. Like, it feels to me like this is just like these were intended to be shadows, but now they're just like this gray instead of dark, right? And so, like, we get to the almost completely black with the hat and the eyebrows, but this doesn't feel like a shadow of this color. It feels like a desaturated shadow. And so I think playing with those colors will help you tremendously. Whether it's actually just adding a little bit more saturation of this color in there, or adding some saturation. Like, this is just a little too gray. On top of that, I think it just needs some cleanup. Like, this, a lot of this kind of has that rat-eaten cheese or mouse-eaten cheese holes chopped out of it. Maybe Swiss would have been a better way of going with that, because I don't think that's how the holes get in there. But it does kind of have that, like, you just took your mouse and kind of clicked out, little nibbles out of it, and that's all right. But it doesn't all meet up correctly, or it doesn't all, like, I think it looks pretty good in the goatee, but it still feels like there's still not enough done to revise the form in, like, this shadow, or like the eyebrows, even the mustache. Like, it feels like it needs a little bit more work to clean it up. And then we get stuff like this where the hair and the hat and the everything is just kind of sort of dropped on top of that ear. And so, is that in front of the ear, or is that supposed to be behind the ear? We get some of it here too, like where that sort of crisscrosses over. And so, more than anything, I just think your shapes need cleaned up. I can open up the Illustrator file and show you on some of that. You may just be able to literally just sort of smooth them a little bit. Okay. So if I were to go in here, I may just be able to grab there you go. Just grab this object and just run the smooth over it. I mean, you don't want to get all that. Ooh, you don't want to get all that out of there, but you may want to. So just by doing some of that, like you're getting some slightly better shapes, right? I also think that with this selected, like I believe more than likely what you were doing was you were using, you created sort of a blobby shape, and then you were sort of chopping out chunks of it, right? And I think that that's fine, but you can still kind of see my brush in that, right? If I click that, you can still see that perfect circle where my brush was. And that just doesn't feel very organic, but just doing something like that, right? So now it feels like it's more of a specific shape. Again, maybe make that a little smaller. Clean up this corner, right? And so we're getting these little curls, and it may be that I want that to sort of come out a little further. And so just by doing that with some of this area, that'll help. But I think the biggest thing is like sort of the overlapping, like he's got kind of this like puffy under the eye thing going on there. And I'm not 100% sure if maybe you were just going for that style in some areas, but what it feels like, and what my suspicion is that was just sort of the easiest way to get some of the more complicated shapes, and you just stopped a little early on them, right? So this piece here, you wanted to get that scraggly shape, so you probably made the overall form of it, right? And then you just sort of, took some chunks out of there. And so instead of that giving you exactly the shape that you need, it gave you a shape that was sort of like starting to be the shape that you need. It's just not complete yet. And so it still just needs cleanup overall. That and I think the saturation thing are the two big elements there. You also notice that just in stuff like this, like that highlight's just very, like, it still feels sketchy. It doesn't feel cleaned up. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's move on. John, you turned in a revision. So for me, the biggest issue with this one was two different things. One, I feel like there's some proportion issues kind of getting this cleaned up. To me, his head feels squashed and maybe a little too wide. That are, those are just kind of, it's feeling almost like caricaturized of him, and that's all right as a way to do it. If you're going for foreshortened, though, I'm not really getting the foreshortening of it. So, like, I would just plop the reference image in there on top of it and see why it's doing that. And to me, it's like his head's kind of sort of. Let me get the drawing tool up so I can show you what I'm talking about. So his head kind of has this like upside down funnel shape to it, and that's me over exaggerating it a little bit, but it does kind of have this like, like gets really wide at the top, and so it's this distance here that feels strange versus like his head just feels kind of short, right? And so to me, I think that's the biggest thing that's hurting it. The other thing is, like, you do a really good job in a few areas of using shapes of color to show what's going on in the form. So example here is his chin kind of flattens out on the bottom, and so instead of this shadow coming all the way down to here, instead of the shadow kind of doing this shape, right, it kind of tucks back in here, and so this just implies form to us. Like we know that means the light is bouncing off these surfaces at a different angle. The same here with this shadow here. You didn't have to draw a line in there to give us that shadow that implies the nose, or that implies the smile line, or I think it's called the nasolabial fold. So you don't have to like completely draw that as a line to get that, but you seem to get that in most of this except for around the nose, and you just kind of have this outline around the nose that to me it's implying the idea of the nose, not what the nose actually looks like. Or let me rephrase that. Like what the light is telling us as it bounces off the skin. So rather than having, that, dark line there, maybe what you would have is you'd have the shadows on the side of the nose here that kind of imply that there's a change in shape there, similar to what you have going on this side, right? That and then this eye just is freaking me out a little. It feels like it's like bloodshot, and like the skin is kind of coming up on it in a weird way, and like I'll just really take another look at that eye to see if there's if there's something else you can do with that to make it read as less like it's almost like it's bloody. I think it's part of it's this bloodshot feel around it, and then this like there's not really any highlights or anything going on that eye. So so that would be my my biggest notes on this. So lost my thing here. There we go. So Joseph. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I think my biggest note is that there's a let's start off with just the form here. So I think the biggest thing is like I can't really tell who this is, and I know that it's partially because the actress isn't like pasted all over all the magazines. Like she's not super popular or super like in the public eye right now, and so that's fine. But I think even if I did recognize, or even if she was somebody who was familiar to me, like there's not enough sort of telling features. Now you got a good start on that with the eyebrows, because you got this sort of dip in the eyebrows. I think you got a very similar, give me about 5 minutes, very similar eye shape, and like some of the shadows in the nose and the mouth. The smile seems very similar. But then the proportions are kind of way off, and I think that you were probably going for sort of a caricaturized version of it, I hope. But then there's stuff like this outline that goes all the way around her head, and so that's kind of like I was talking in the previous I think it was John's piece, is that's more like the idea of the shape of her head, not how the light will actually sort of indicate that. And so you have some good stuff with the lighting going on with like these pieces here that are just, that's sort of indicating where the light's hitting. But I think a lot of your problem is actually in the process of how you did this, because if I click on some of these elements in here, I see that you're kind of, like that's just, instead of filling something in, you've just kind of sketched a bunch of strokes. And so that's not really the best way to get those shapes. And like all that really is sort of a half like crescent shape. And so there's a whole bunch of other ways you could have gotten that in a much cleaner way. Like even if it was just, something like that, right? And then we can go in here and grab this tangent, hold down Alt, and break that, right? So we got a very clean shape now that we could have, that's not the, there we go. So like we could do something like that with it. And it just gives us more control over it. So I think that you're taking kind of the simpler or the route that just isn't requiring as much effort to get there. And my thinking is you're probably using the brush or the pencil tool with a pretty heavy stroke on it, and you're just drawing over and over again with these kind of strokes to get whatever it is you want, because that's how you think of like coloring with crayons. But this isn't, or a brush or whatever, but this isn't that kind of illustrating tool. Like this is more of a paper cutout, and so I think you're gonna have to try to wrap your mind around creating illustrations inside of Vector in a different way, because otherwise you're going to be very limited to what you're able to create. And there's some things you'll just never be able to create this way. Like you're not going to be able to do the blends this way. You're not going to be able to do the mesh tool this way. You're going to have to create them out of shapes and learn to sort of chisel those shapes into the more refined shapes that you need. Okay, so this video right now, we're at about 30 minutes, and I think we're around halfway through. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it and break it up into 2 videos. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.